Welcome to Master B2B, the world's first and only unwebinar series. We're taking on the key issues in B2B e-commerce for manufacturers and distributors, and you get to vote on who wins the debate. My name is Brian Beck. I am thrilled to be joined today again by Andy Hoare. For those of you who don't know Andy, he's a 7-year veteran of Forrester Research, where he ran the e-commerce practice, B2B e-commerce practice. He is the CEO of Paradigm B2B, a longtime colleague, thought leader in the space. Andy, thrilled to be here again with you today.
Yeah, Brian, great to be here. And it's good we're wearing different shirts this time.
That's right.
Last time we wore the exact same shirt, apparently. So we're not for uniformity here at all.
That's right.
But yeah, so for those of you who don't know Brian, my co-host here, Brian's been in the B2B space for 20 years. He was a practitioner for a good chunk of those. He's a consultant now, thought leader, author of a book I used to show everybody, but $1 billion B2B e-commerce, well worth the read. A lot of good insights in there, and great to be here again, Brian. This is a good topic.
It is, Andy, and this is an unwebinar, right? So this isn't your typical webinar. Again, we have a debate, and so we have two teams. We have a sponsor, Big Commerce, and they're going to participate in the debate with our contenders who are practitioners. We've got a fantastic group today to talk about and contest this issue, ROI, all about ROI in e-commerce. Now, the audience, we want to hear from you. So in the chat box on the right here, the Q&A box, please put in your questions. We want you to submit those. We'll get to as many as we can. And you are going to have a chance to vote at the end of each of our 3 rounds during this unwebinar. So Andy, this is another critical issue. We're talking about ROI. Why do ROI calculations often fail in B2B e-commerce? What are the hidden costs? What are the surprise upsides? You know, and I've dealt with this myself, Andy, in my years as an operator, as a practitioner. I found in 17 years doing that, oftentimes it's more important to just start taking action rather than building business cases around everything. And I know you're not going to fully agree with me today, and that's part of our debate. I weigh into action versus business casing everything to death. So, this is a hot topic. We posted this again on LinkedIn. We have folks, I was reviewing the list, Andy, of folks who are participating today. And again, we've got lots and lots of companies, the who's who represented. We've got Todd Brayton, VP at Asbill, Chris and Nick here from Ballard Industrial. I see Matt Wingham's logging in from Cardinal Health. We got Kelly Bennett from Henkel. We got several people from Google here, State Electric, Waters Corporation, Stellar Industrial Supply. Again, it was just a nice broad representation of the industry, clearly a hot issue. And when we posted this issue on LinkedIn, we also got thousands of comments, likes, shares, views, etc., as we normally do on these issues. Andy, a couple of things I want to share with you real quick. Some comments we got back on the question we asked. Joe Sisman at Forrester, he said, spending on e-commerce without doing the primary customer research to figure out what really matters is the #1 downfall practitioners make. I'm betting, Andy, you probably agree with Joe on that one as a former colleague. And Chris, another comment I want to read here quickly. Chris McCarty, who's the president of EnviroSafety Products, who just joined us here, I see. He weighed in. He said, the biggest ROI miss in e-commerce is lifetime value of a newly acquired customer. What it costs to generate an order should be compared more than just the customer's first order. Chris, I couldn't agree more. So we're going to get into that during our debate today too. So Andy, I'm doing all the talking here. Let's go to the issue. Chime in here. What are the issues of interest here today? Why do ROI calculations always fall short or often fall short?
Well, I would argue because they're not comprehensive enough, and that's what we're going to debate today. So we have 2 schools of thought on this. One is kind of keep it simple. Like they say in the military, keep it simple, stupid, right? I'll leave the stupid part off, but just keep it simple. And, on the revenue side, you can see a calculation similar to what you see on the screen here. And this is compliments of Marta Dalton from Unilever, who's actually one of our panelists today, who's done a lot of thinking around this. So you see on the screen, you got revenue equals sessions times web conversion rate times average order value, a fairly standard metric on the revenue side. And some would argue that's plenty, right? And then on the cost side, which is the next slide, you can see a similar kind of standard metric, which is just attribute costs of e-commerce to e-commerce, right? And this is actual information from Marta. They calculate technology to be about 60% of the cost to serve, people around 25%, admin around 15%. We're going to dig into this a bit. However, there are others who believe there's a deeper sort of meaning here around ROI. And this is also from what Marta's done in the past. You can see there's a lot of depth here. We're not going to go through all of this. I just want to highlight two columns in particular: customer support and field operations and sales capability. These are two things that are really critical in B2B. And for those who are new to the B2B world, this is something that is often forgotten in ROI calculation. We are definitely going to talk about this one today, but Marta would argue, for example, that you need to weave that into your calculation such that your calculation isn't just the standard calculation, which is the next slide, where you just have, again, on the revenue side, simple formula. What really needs to take place is what you'll see in the next slide, which is some depth around this. And note the part in the red box, excuse me, you'll see that, field operations and sales capability, as well as customer support, factors in on the revenue side in terms of sessions and web conversion rate and average order value. Because if you're not calculating, for example, what influence the website is having on your sales team, internal and external, then you're missing part of the revenue picture. And I would argue, I think Marta would too, you're missing part of the cost picture as well. So the next slide speaks to a little bit of that. Again, this is the standard cost to serve calculation, but perhaps a more accurate version is something that includes not just the direct cost to serve of e-commerce, but also your telesales operation, your field sales operation. You'll see some slightly different numbers here in terms of cost to serve distribution. But the point of this is that the cost to serve really deserves to be more comprehensive, because if you're bringing more revenue in from different channels, you need to factor in the costs associated with them as well.
Got it, Andy. Well, that all sounds good, but it sounds a little too complicated for me. I believe in keeping it simple.
Well, you said that, not me.
Well, here, I mean, this is the subject of our debate, though, because I really do believe there is time lost. If you're spending all your time doing business cases on this stuff and not time building, then I believe you're losing competitive advantage. So let's get to our introductions. We have a fantastic team today on both sides of the equation here of the debate. I'm siding more with team Keep It Simple, as you might have guessed. And we've got two fantastic contenders here. The first of which is Michael, the Eliminator Eichinger. Michael is I love the way you put this. He massacres inefficiency as the COO of innovative distributor Bay Fastening Systems. And for those of you guys who don't know Michael, okay, so this guy took a traditional distributor in a highly competitive industry and almost doubled the company's sales using e-commerce. And guess what? He didn't spend all day long doing business cases. He took action. Michael says a test and learn approach must be used, and this approach is far more productive than trying to build business cases upfront for every aspect of e-commerce. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right. Ready to bring it on. Our second contender, and one who makes excellent videos, boxing videos, Megan. I love that boxing video. Megan, the Stingray Stabler. I love this too. The Stingray inflicts pain on bad arguments like no other. Megan is the Vice President of Global Product Marketing, Communications, and International Marketing at e-commerce platform BigCommerce. She comes from a distinguished career. She was at CA Technologies, BMC Software. Megan, you've been around this stuff for quite some time. She says, in the fast-changing world of B2B e-commerce, it is a waste of time to measure everything. Stephen and Marta. Waste of time to measure everything. Speed to market is critical to meet the ever-rising customer's expectation. Megan, welcome.
Done. That was the ending punch. Congratulations. Happy to be here.
On webinar's over, we won. Andy, go ahead and introduce the losing team.
Yeah, and I want to recognize Megan too for that great video she did. There was just one problem with it. She was wearing gloves. See, this is bare knuckle boxing. Oh. So you can wear your pink gloves, Megan, but that may not cut it on the floor here. So let me introduce you to the team that's going to bloody up all you guys without getting too graphic here. So we've got Marta Demolisher Dalton, which I gotta love Marta's image there. She's demolishing stuff on the screen right behind her as we speak. So many of you probably know Marta. Marta's been in and around B2B commerce for quite a bit of time, and she's really established herself as a significant thought leader here. So I'm going to read the description here. So Marta devastates dumb approaches as the demolisher. As the global director of e-commerce at global consumer products manufacturer Unilever, Marta knows it's critical to understand the details of ROI before any investment is made. She says, if you don't know what to expect to spend and get back, you have no way to measure whether you're successful or not, and you're more likely to fail. So Marta's definitely on the side of let's bring more input, more data in, and let's measure it. So welcome, Marta.
Yeah, really excited to be on the detailed side, aka the winning side today.
Well said. I couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, so then joining this team is Stephen Go for the Jugular Javor. I love, this is maybe the most creative nickname we've had so far because it wasn't just one word, it's several words. In fact, it's a statement. Go for the jugular. So the jugular javor takes inertia by the throat and chokes inaction out of organizational bureaucracy. But Stephen doesn't confuse being aggressive with skipping over critical planning details as the global e-commerce director at $29 billion giant Schneider Electric. He says a carefully crafted plan for investment and return from e-commerce is absolutely essential before you start. So before you say it, Brian, about analysis paralysis and all the other stuff you've got, bullets you've got in the chamber on this one, consider you're probably not going to get investment for something that you can't demonstrate has value. So I will leave you with that and turn it back to you to get going.
All right, that was a great setup, Andy. It's time. Let's rumble. All right, Andy Hoare, you have 8 minutes. Better
Let's
start
jump
living.
in. Okay, so first topic is about defining critical ROI measures and metrics. So I figured we'd start with something foundational here. And so it's a simple question. How do you decide on the formula? So which revenue and cost metrics do include? So we're going to go to Team Keep It Simple first, who I assume is going to tell us that we should just focus on a few key metrics and keep it simple. So Megan, you have a thought on this. Tell us why we should keep this so simple.
Yeah, I think we should keep it simple because we spend too much time getting hung up on the rush to measure an ROI, right? There are studies out there, especially from LinkedIn, that have surveyed the global base of B2B marketers and what they're doing. And they say, look, 58% of digital marketers say that they have to prove the value of ROI before they start getting funding. My view is you keep it simple. Number of customers, number of orders, average order value. And if you're using a multi-channel approach, what's coming through what channel? Keep it simple and go through it because, and I think another problem that we talked about here was lifetime value of customers, right? How are you measuring the lifetime value of customers? Some marketers go ahead and measure it in the first month. Well, surely that can't be true for B2B, where your average sales cycle is longer than a month. It could be 6 months. And so another part of the survey from LinkedIn also showed that 78% of marketers said, yes, we're measuring this LTV within a month. But then by the time 6 months turns around, only 4% of them are saying we're still measuring it. So my statement is, look, I do believe ROI is good, but measuring everything that you can do before you start a project off is the wrong thing. And is it an ROI that you want to measure, or is it a KPI that you want to measure? Are there some quick wins looking at KPIs that you need to get in place and start measuring by? And essentially, how can you also reduce your total cost of ownership when you're looking at some of those slides from Martha there, right? You've got staffing costs, you've got hosting costs, you've got security costs. Eliminate those out of the gate, save yourself time and money, and then start focusing on the things that run your business. And don't be beholden to the financial team because you're a big, old, stodgy corporation holding you back that they must have those numbers before you can proceed. My view is get the early numbers in there, measure the small things, use that as value to go back and show them how well you're doing. So keep it simple, keep it short, keep it quick, and start measuring from there. And I'll leave you with this last analogy. And I know my product marketing team that are probably listening to this love my analogies, right? How many of us are gourmet chefs? Not many. How many of us maybe watch Below Deck Mediterranean, where they have these wonderful guests on there, where each guest has a different cuisine, ask, need, aversion to different foods? If you want to deliver all of that food at the same time to the table for a sit-down menu, you've got to practice and take short steps. I'm no good at cooking. I will start cooking a few things. When I get that timing right, I know it in my head, and then I'm going to start something else as that next course or for somebody else. So my view is keep it simple, one step at a time, and then you can deliver on your results.
Wow. I hope you have some energy left for the subsequent rounds, Megan. Michael, anything you want to add to that, or did Megan pretty much cover it all?
I think Megan pretty much covered it all. The only thing I would say is that when you are going through this transformation, when Megan had pointed out that there's no history, there's no record, it's new. That digital transformation really is going to alter every part of your business. So keeping it simple really means focusing in on how well you're transforming. What is the transition from traditional business to digital? And that's the most simple approach to see how well you're transforming before you can start measuring all the other metrics.
Well, let's turn it over to the other side now. So Marta, I think you have a different opinion. Obviously, we showed some of your slides, so we've given away some of your thinking on this one, but why don't you tell us why you think this metric needs to be more exhaustive and expansive?
Yeah, so Megan, just like your beauty is not only skin deep, neither is this equation. You have to be able to dig down into it and understand that, yes, I have an average order value increase or decrease. What do I need to know in order to understand what's happening behind the scenes there? So I need to have the additional information, not just on my web metrics, but on my costs, on my field sales, my telesales. B2B is fascinating because it's such an interlinked world. I think that's why we all love being in it. So it's not just about what's happening in the digital, it's on the physical side and understanding all of the behavioral pieces that come into it. You find so many unique things that B2B people search for because they use different terms in their industry, or access to credit, or even physical space size in their stockroom can limit their buying power. So you can't just focus on a couple of top level metrics, or you're going to miss the entire picture that is a B2B customer's opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, etc.
I'm biased, but I felt like a knockout. Anyway, Stephen, anything you would like to add to that? Put a cherry on top of it?
I think, that, Marta really hit the nail on the head there. But I would say that, I wouldn't drown myself in metrics. I think it's important. What Megan did say is you have to understand the KPIs, right? But it's important to get as many metrics as you can because the B2B journey is very sophisticated. It's much more sophisticated than the B2C journey. There's a lot of other influences that you need to take account of. So I agree with Marta that we need to, get as many a broad understanding of the B2B market. But I do think from a reporting standpoint, you also don't want to drown in metrics. You do want to have a few KPIs that you focus on to your leadership, because they won't understand all the complexity, but you need to.
Yeah, and I think we're going to dig a little deeper into that in a subsequent round too. So a couple of folks brought up multiple channels here. Let's ask that question as well. In fact, that's the next question here is measuring cross-channel attribution worth the time? Again, the issue here is it's multiple channels, right? Some people have will call windows. Some people have, as has been mentioned, salespeople inside, external. There are chat services, there are partners in marketplaces, there are all these different channels. And if you're measuring ROI, can you ignore them? But if you do actually want to include them, how do you include them? Because closing that loop can be very difficult, as we all know. So let's go to measure everything. Let's flip this a little bit. Steve, let's go to you first.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on measuring cross-channel attribution? Is it worth it?
Yeah, it's pretty key because we do need to understand the fact that the B2B buying journey is much different. There's a difference between, sometimes you'll have, someone who's actually shopping on your B2B site versus someone who's actually buying. There may be actually two different roles, and they may take extended times. We heard, Megan say it might be a 60-day or even a 6-month time window to do that. But you have to understand that, you need to attribute some of the sales that are not going through your shopping cart or even through your purchase, your e-procurement solutions. In our studies with all our channels, about 60% of all of the orders that our distributors go through emailed POs. If I want to do something for Schneider, I have to email a PO, but I'm starting my journey online. Yet we're only measuring what's going through the web cart or maybe even through e-procurement, which is only for the larger customers. I would finally sort of sit there and conclude with the fact that I look at one of my partners and they're a large partner, yet I take a look at their e-commerce sales and it's only about 2% of their total sales. But we put in tens of thousands of dollars in there. Are we saying that if I eliminate all of our SKUs within that particular distributor, I'm only going to lose 2% of sales? We know that's not true.
No, totally. In fact, in the interest of time, I think we're gonna postpone your jump in here on this, Marta. You'll get a chance to go to address this later. I want to go to you quickly, Michael, on Team Keep It Simple. You have a different perspective on this. You say it's really too difficult to measure and it may not be a good use of time.
Well, yeah. So when we look at the fact that we're transforming everything in a business, it's like trying to define the ROI of a business totally in all aspects. And there's so much intangible return on investment that you really can't account for. So that's why ROI calculations fall short, because when we look at something like an ad spend, digital ad spend that results ultimately not in a conversion on hard measurements, but ultimately in a conversion from direct traffic, or when we look at the fact that traditional channel business is increasing because of your digital exposure, how are you capturing all those metrics accurately? The truth is you can measure this stuff to death, but in keeping it simple is, take the action, make sure you're retaining your customer base, make sure that you're making that shift from traditional to digital, make sure all the pieces are in place from your organizational standpoint, and then you can turn around and start getting into all the nitty-gritty of those other metrics.
Well, we've heard what both teams have to say, Brian. I know we're running short on time in this.
We're out of time, Andy, on this round.
So let's go to the poll. And
Gotta go to the poll.
let's put it up there. There it is. Okay, what does it take to measure B2B e-commerce ROI effectively? In other words, what's the best way to do it? Have a few metrics, as one team has argued, and really focus on those, or factor in several more metrics and go for more complex, comprehensive ROI. Brian, they were like throwing punches in the green.
I know, but your team already is jumping ship on you, man. I mean, listen to Steven said, "Hey, don't drown in metrics." He said that. I mean, you're down. You just got Marta left. Your team is getting crushed here. Anyway, now listen. Seriously, I think Michael just said it really well, which is this is really complex, and I think we all agree that it can be difficult to measure these things, which is why I'm an advocate for keeping it simple. And I think Megan made the case well. I think Michael did too, that it's important to not to ignore metrics. Okay, we don't. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't measure our success. But I think keeping it simple, looking at e-commerce revenue, looking at things like lead generation that's being driven from the e-com site to the Salesforce. Look at sales per customer, right? Because some of the most impactful metrics I've seen in terms of ROI, and I'm talking about the cost, I'm talking about ROI here, the top line, the revenue part of it, the return part of it. One of the most powerful metrics is how many sales, what share of wallet are you getting from your customer? And I think if you're doing some of those things well, it's enough to tell you are meeting the needs and you're driving return on investment. If you start getting into multi-channel attribution, I remember having these conversations with Matt at Cardinal Health. People using the website and then going on their EDI system to place the order. How do you attribute that? They spent a lot of time trying to figure that out, and guess what? They never really figured it out. So it's a difficult problem, and if you're spending your time on these things and not executing, I think you're losing ground. That's my opinion. What do you think?
Well, I think there are two things that are missing here. One is that there's tremendous value associated because it's the website is also the front, door of the business, and the time and money and effort you spend to put that front door in business is generating traffic, not just to the website, but to all other manners of the business. And it generates operational efficiencies that you need to at least take a shot at measuring. But here's a big one nobody mentioned, and I'll just close with this: data. Look at all the data that gets generated, clickstream data, behavioral data. How do you put a price on that? And I guess, Brian, you would argue, it's not worth the time.
Right. And I know we got to go back to our round here. One, we just had some comments come in. Margie said, I'd rather have a few metrics and take action on those rather than many metrics and not enough time to take action. I thought that's interesting comment. We got to go to round two here. So let's get ready to go to round two. Ding, ding. There it is. Thank you, ding, ding. Thank you, Andy. So our next topic, guys, identifying relevant revenue and cost considerations in your ROI model. So our first question is generating incremental revenue from e-commerce versus just revenue a requirement for accepting an ROI calculation? The question is about incrementality. I hear this all the time. We're going to go to team measure everything first. And Marta, let's hear from you on this topic.
Yeah, so Brian, I think that lift and shift are both required. And honestly, the biggest complaint about calculating lift is that usually it's too difficult to do. And it's so simple that even you could do it, Brian, I promise. So if you're just looking at channel shift, then it's really hard to make a case to your executives that you've done any moving forward with your B2B e-commerce. They're assuming they could have done the same work with their field sales, with their existing telesales. Now, when you start bringing the lift to the table and explain that there is this shopping effect, this personalization effect, because customers have the opportunity to browse the entire catalog, to see promotions in a way they never could before. You think about the amount of time that a sales rep has out there in trade. Maybe 5 minutes of their visit is able to talk about new products or promotions. A customer can spend as much time as they like. When I was at Coca-Cola, I saw my average visit time go from about 3 minutes, 5 minutes to up to 9 minutes, where my conversion rate stayed the same or even increased because my customers had the ability to learn more for themselves. So lift is a huge part of the story, and it's a great way to get additional money from the executives for funding to continue to grow.
Awesome. Well, that was one of the questions we had in the chat too, about how do you explain this stuff to executives. Stephen, what do you think? Weigh in on this. Incrementality. You're on mute.
I think that the one thing that I think Andy brought up, or it might have been you, Brian, is understanding the value of data and making sure that you're fully monetizing your website, your e-commerce solution. I look at what Home Depot and Amazon are. They're selling data back to me. I'm happy to pay for that data to get a better understanding of how I'm going to be able to better manipulate my channel on there. Every e-commerce solution that has a volume of traffic and has manufacturers selling, promoting their products on their site should be selling this data back. It's an unused revenue stream, unseen, and data is really the key of e-commerce. We all know that.
Okay, so the question here, guys, is really about incrementality, right? So Michael, let's go to you next. Is it just enough to measure your e-com revenue? Do you really need to understand the incrementality of it? Is it important that it's more revenue from the existing customers, or is it just okay to measure revenue from e-com?
Again, keeping it simple up front, right? I mean, we can get technical as we go further on in the transformation journey, but in the beginning, it's more vital to ensure that you're not disrupting your customer base, that people are buying into the digital adoption of what your business is evolving into. And as long as you can do that transformation fine, all of those numbers that you're talking about in lift will come and follow with it.
And Michael, you once told me that you're getting, I think you said 3 to 5 new customers every week from e-commerce, right? And that's people be finding you on Google and other places.
Actually, yeah. I
that's
mean,
incremental, isn't it?
Well, it's incremental, but at some point I started measuring that after we had a transition. So we watched our business transition from traditional channel to digital. We made sure that we were holding our ground revenue wise. We made sure that our organization can process orders most efficiently. We got everybody to embrace the transition. And from there, we started adding all these other metrics. So in the beginning, it's more important to take action and keep things simple and pay attention to the core piece, because the core components that everybody's and let's talk about top management, they're afraid that they're going to hurt the business. So, they'll reinvest in anything that allows them to make a successful digital transformation and shows promise.
Okay, good points. Thank you. Megan, what do you say on this topic? Incrementality, important to measure or no?
A little bit of it, yeah, but I'm going to be obviously in the same lane as Michael on this one, right? Anything that you do that is going to add value to your customers, your sales reps, your distributors, is the right thing to go ahead and do. So I'm for the test and learn that we've talked about before, right? Go ahead and test these new channels, right? How are you attracting these new customers to your platform, to your marketplace, or to your other channels? How are you changing your website in a way that makes it easier for me to find something if I'm a B2B buyer and go ahead and do my orders? So it's just the simple steps that you need to take, and then measure again upon those simple steps. Don't overcomplicate this through the channels.
I think part of it too sounds like the theme that's emerging here is a bit of where you are in your journey. So, second question, guys, in this round: can you realistically account for both variable and fixed costs in your ROI equation? I'm going to go to team Keep It Simple first, and let's go to you, Michael, on this one. Can you account for those costs?
I think you have to account for your fixed and variable costs, but I think what you're looking at is getting too deep into the metrics of everything that you do. So, I mean, when we look at hard costs, standard ROI calculations would follow that simple formula that we saw before, right? You're just looking at what your fixed costs are. If you're spending money, what the return on investment is based on that spend. But when we get into the digital transformation complexities in digital marketing, there's way too much there in the variables to measure it all. So again, I'm with the keep it simple. Stick to the core fundamentals, and then you can start to expand into fixed and variables later related to all your digital expenditures.
You were talking about at the beginning, Marta, some of your stuff was very much about more the fixed costs, I think. I want to get Megan's take on this real quick, then we'll go to you guys on the other side.
Well, yeah, I just want to go back to the point that you made, Brian, right? Which is, it depends where you are in your journey, right? If you're a big, old B2B company, you've been around for a long time, right? Hawking your wares, having your salespeople go from door to door to actually sell it, you're probably trying to measure everything, right? The world has changed. The pandemic changed it upon us, and it changed it for every salesperson that is out there in every B2B business. So I think what we're saying, what Michael and I are saying is, look, if you want to transform yourself as an old B2B company to be modern architectures, go for a TCO with measurable KPIs, you can do it. If you're starting out on your journey, you're going from B2C to B2B, you're a warehouse, wholesale, distributor, whatever it is, this train has moved on. You don't have the time to waste. There are going to be key things that you measure, right? Where are you with your inventory today? How much of it is flying off the shelves? What are you doing? So I'm not against measuring some things. I'm just saying, get going, do the test and learn, and get measuring some things.
I love the test and learn, Megan. That's great. Okay, we got a quick rebuttal from each of our folks on the other side. Marty, you want to go first? You're off mute already. You're chomping to the bit here. Go.
Yeah, so I think that you have to have both variable and fixed, because it's the fixed that your execs are going to understand where you can reduce costs first. And let me be clear, I am never for firing salespeople. That's not what we're doing in B2B commerce. What we're doing is we're repurposing them so that we can serve more customers at a lower cost and focus on using the sales team for what they are best at. I like to call e-commerce the 24/7 personal assistant doing all the crap your sales team doesn't want to do. So, but ultimately, if you're not hiring additional heads and you don't have to, then you're much better managing your fixed costs. And I love things like what Michelle said in the chat, the cost of missing the digital wave. Where's the missed opportunity cost and how do you bring that in? It's a great part of the story. The challenge there that I've usually had is I'm trying to prove the absence of something. If we don't do this, then we're going to lose a certain amount of money. Is that a real risk? Absolutely. Does every executive I've ever sat in front of understand it? Nope. So I think it's a lot easier to have a conversation, especially if you're in one of those older traditional industries, about fixed costs, about what the risk is, about being able to use one sales rep to serve 20%, 30% more accounts. Every executive understands that.
All right, good stuff, Marta. And Stephen Javor, one quick close us up here. Any comments to add?
I totally agree with Marta, and I think you have to remember that salespeople are no longer order takers. If you've got salespeople as order takers, then you're heading down the wrong avenue. They need to be solutions providers. They need to be relationship builders.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. We got to go to our poll. Guys, good discussion here. All right, let's bring that poll up. Thank you. Here's the question, audience. We need you to vote on it. Round 2. Is generating incremental revenue versus just revenue, this is from e-commerce, necessary for an acceptable ROI calculation? Yes or no? Andy, Marta said this is not death of a B2B salesman. You wrote that. Your whole team is abandoning you. What do you think?
Actually, completely different subject. And I would say in terms of teams abandoning, I don't know, maybe I missed this, but didn't Michael say we started out measuring some of the simple stuff, but then we started measuring incremental?
Okay.
I snuck that one in.
Right.
Yeah. Graduated to the idea that incremental is actually pretty useful here. So, but in all seriousness, I think people have mentioned this over and over again. You have to do both. and you can't ignore the shift. The lift is, I would argue, absolutely critical here, because that does show some advancement, some movement forward. If you're just doing from Peter to give to Paul, although I think if you're doing that to preserve your market share, then it's well worth it. But there are a lot of executives, as Marta pointed out, who are just going to look at that and go, great, we're still treading water. I want to start swimming now. And in fact, I remember reading on the LinkedIn post that Eric Nevia pointed this out from Masterlock. He said, basically, shift is opportunity cost. It's true. I mean, if you think about it, if you're not protecting the back door and only focused on the front door, you could be bringing stuff in the front door with incremental and watch it walk out the back door with shift over to your competitors or potentially to other unmeasurable channels where you can't establish the ROI. So this isn't an and proposition, incremental revenue and shift.
It's interesting. And the other thing I'll point out is Marta made a bit of an argument there around this being almost existential, Andy, meaning that you got to get started, right? And so I think we're blending arguments a little bit here, but I think that's an important note that, you're gonna lose relevance to your customers if you don't have this. All right, our round is up. We got to go to round 3. Can we bring up the ding ding? There it is, round 3.
Okay, so this one's all about determining the appropriate timeline for payback, because obviously a calculation, there's some time value to money here. And the real critical question is, what is the appropriate timeline for payback on this? In other words, what are you measuring ROI over what period of time? People have actually, through this entire debate, brought this up over and over again. Let's grab it by the throat and let's bring it down to the ground. So here's the question. Can you produce customer lifetime value, a CLV figure that stands up to scrutiny? Again, we all learned this in college or in graduate school about calculating lifetime value. And then we get in the real world and people go, that's not really possible, or it's too hard, or gosh, I don't have time for that. Let's ask the group here. So team, keep it simple. Megan, let's go to you first. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't think you're a big fan of the customer lifetime value as in place of other potential measurements.
I think you're putting words in my mouth, my friend, as usual. But you are a former analyst, so I have to give you some credit on that one, right, Brian? I do think that you can measure lifetime value, right? But it's a matter of what is your business and what are you trying to measure? I like to look at churn. I like to look at retention. I like to look at upsell, cross-sell of merchants, right? We're in the SaaS business, right? We have a B2B platform that you don't have to worry about the maintenance and the costs and the upgrades on that one. I need to focus on the customer value. I need to focus on the customer retention. I need to focus on customer satisfaction, right? Bain & Company did some research a couple of years ago that said a 5% increase in customer retention can boost your profits by 25% or more. So mine is just the same as I've said before, keep it simple, right? As a SaaS-based business, of course, we're looking at our MRR and our ARR and our lifetime value of a customer. It's all gonna depend on your business and what you want as the outcome, but focus on, again, those short-term key things, including churn rate, right?
So Michael, I think you're a fan of retention as well as a superordinate measurement over something like customer lifetime value.
Yeah, that goes along with timeline, right? So in the beginning, you're focusing on retention, you're focusing on stability, and then you're focusing on growth following that. And I think the same thing goes. You can do all the measurements you want, but one of the critical ones is customer retention through that digital transformation. Then you can start looking at customer lifetime value, which, by the way, is not able to be defined in the early stages of digital. It's a completely different landscape, different way of doing business, and it's completely disrupting everything. So how could you talk about customer lifetime value when you're developing a whole new type of customer?
All right, let's put that to team measure everything. Marta, Stephen, how can you measure customer lifetime value, either at the beginning, the middle, or the end? And I think you're going to argue that you have to, because how do you know what you're measuring against, right? What's the benchmark?
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with Megan and Michael's sassy response. These are the puns, folks. I think you have to measure customer lifetime value, and it has to start at the beginning. And here's why. So you think about your customer acquisition cost in B2B, and the only way you can back into a reasonable customer acquisition cost is by understanding what that customer lifetime value is. One of the biggest challenges in B2B is that as you get up and running, the primary customer acquisition method for you is going to be through your sales team. Nothing costs more. So making up numbers, your field sales team costs you $50 an hour, fully loaded. That means every half hour to 45 minutes that they're going to spend with a customer trying to get them onboarded. And it probably takes 3 or 4 visits. You're in the hundreds of dollars. Now in B2B, we tend to have average order values of 1,000. Our margins are a little on the slimmer side, maybe 10%. You start doing that math and you're not going to get a first year ROI. And it's going to be really hard to justify putting that much of your sales team time or even your telesales time against getting customers acquired. Now, can you onboard with digital marketing automation, SMS, et cetera? Absolutely, but you're not going to do it from day one. In many cases, when I started a job, we didn't even have customer phone numbers or email addresses. So the sales team was required to start building that database so that longer term, you could reduce your customer acquisition costs. And the only way I could build a case for that was by being able to show that my customer lifetime value was going to make it worth it.
Stephen, if you aim for nothing, you're bound to hit it, right? So you need something in the form of a CLV to be able to, again, establish a goal, don't you?
You do, and I think there's also another argument that you can even refine it a bit closer, which I think does take time and depends on what kind of company you are and where you are on the journey of that. Maybe you look at a cash multiplier figure of your customer lifetime value, maybe looking at it 30, 60, 90, maybe even 6 months, depending on your B2B business, right? But you have to pick a time window that you can affect and that you can await to afford.
Good answer. So that's actually a really good segue to the second question we want to address here quickly. And we might go with an attenuated version of this in the interest of time, but what's the appropriate time horizon? We've all kind of thrown numbers out there. I've heard 6 months, I've heard 5 years. Let's go to team measure everything. And to you first, Stephen, I assume you're looking at a longer time frame because it's called customer lifetime value, not customer, quarterly or monthly or daily value. But what are your thoughts on lifetime? Well, what is the lifetime that you're looking at?
I mean, you can't wait for the perfect business case. And I agree that the fact that you need to move fast, you need to get an MVP as much as possible, but you need to have a plan. You need to have a long-term plan to understand, I like to describe an e-commerce as sort of similar to giving birth. You spend all of this time trying to get everything right and perfect and ready for that big day where it goes live. And then it goes live and you think, oh, well, job done. Well, that's actually the first day. Now you've got to keep it alive. Now you've got to keep it growing. Now you've got to continue to moderate and feed it. So, the time frame is manageable. I mean, it shifts depending on the business. But I do agree that, you can't sit there and spend 2 years building a business case. I once spent 7 years trying to get the right CIO, CEO, CFO aligned to rebuild a business case to get e-commerce. It was far too long and the cost of opportunity went by. So it is a balance.
Well, Marta, it's not 7 years, but you're a mother too. And I think you've had a few children. And you know that the mothering part does sort of begin once you have the child. So why don't you enlighten us about how you think about time frame?
Yeah, much like with e-commerce, the conception part is the most fun. So when you're thinking about your longer term, I think I just broke Brian. So the 3 to 5 year horizon. If you're not familiar with the term technical debt, go look it up because I have lived the pain, much like Stephen. If you don't plan appropriately and take enough time to do the requirements, to set a good solid technical foundation, you're going to pay for it later. At an unnamed job I've had previously, and there's actually somebody on the chat who I used to work with, and he lived this same pain. We had to bring in a rescue for a Hybris installation because once we launched it, it crashed repeatedly at least once a week for the first 2 months. If you don't spend enough time planning and going through the technical side, you're going to feel a lot more pain later, and it might cost you twice as much to get it turned around.
Well said, but we'll give the other side a chance to salvage their argument. So Megan, I think you're going to weigh in quickly on this one. I think you're going to say, you don't have years, you've got months, but I'm not going to put words in your mouth.
You do in this digital world. You have months to go ahead and do it, right? These old ways of doing things are no more in this new digital revolution that we're living in nowadays. So my thing is always going to be test and learn. And I'm sorry that Stephen had to go through 7 years of trying to convince the executives to do this. I do agree slightly with Marta. You have to look at technical debt. What is your cost to go ahead and build this out. But at the end of the day, if you're not starting to do it today, your competitors probably will be. So at least do a little bit of work, get something up and running and go online.
Well, I think that was a great debate. We're getting lots of comments, especially about the puns. And then Jason Hine asked, what happens when the child becomes a teenager? So that's a really interesting question. That's another discussion for another day, but let's go to our poll question. And then we'll move to the end here. So here's the question. Is customer lifetime value, CLV, the most important outcome of ROI? Is it worth your time, basically? Yes or no? So let's chat about this a little bit, Brian. There's a lot there, some really interesting stuff. People kind of jumping different sides here.
That was fantastic. No, that was fantastic. So you heard Mr. Steven. He said, you can't wait for the perfect business case. Andy, that means take action, Andy, not calculate everything. Okay, so customer lifetime value, is it important? Absolutely, over time. I think the takeaway here to me is you got to look at where you are in your business evolution, in your digital transformation journey. If you're early, you guys just got to get going. You can't wait around. Don't take 7 years. No offense, Steven. Don't take 7 years to you got to work. You got to get something going. Megan made the point as well. I think that's important. And if you look at why Michael and Bay Fasting has done so well with e-commerce, right? It's because they took action and because they got the process started. I have lots of case studies of that in my book, Andy. It's true. You evolve as you grow. Customer lifetime value comes. I think you need to be there in order to sustain it. This is existential, not incremental. I like to say that because this is an existential risk to your business if you're not engaged in e-commerce. So anyway, what did you think of that last round?
Well, I think, Brian, you've become quite adept at false dichotomies.
Okay.
You paint the picture as either we rush forward without a plan, or we wait 7 years, as was sadly the case. I think there's some middle ground here. I think there's some planning that goes into this. Clearly, a lot of iteration that takes place, but it isn't one or the other. It is this middle ground where I think you have to have a 3 to 5. I used to always say you have to have a 3 to 5 year vision.
Right.
You need a 12 to 18 month operating or execution plan, and don't mix the two up. Don't have a 12-month vision and a 3 to 5 year operating plan. That's not going to work. So you have to aim for something to make sure you can do it. And I think customer lifetime value or calculations near that are really critical, because how do you know what you're able to spend? This is the whole point of, I think, CLV.
I think you got to look at share of wallet, Andy, that being your key metric that'll lead you into something like a CLV over time. Listen, we're making these arguments at the extremes for the sake of the on the webinar here, but I would agree with you. You do have to have some level of plan. You can't go in willy-nilly. So, but I think it's picking the right metrics, particularly when you're starting, because otherwise I just see this tendency in B2B to overanalyze everything. I learned a long time ago as a B2C operator for 17 years, you got to operate with 80% of the information, just get going, right? As opposed to waiting for 100%. And a lot of B2B companies wait for 100% of the information before they pull the trigger, and you got other folks passing you by in the meantime. So that's kind of what I mean. I think we need to go now. We're out of time on this piece. We need to go to our closing arguments. So let's get a quick, let's bring Megan back on. Megan, you here? There she is.
Hey guys, I am here.
So go ahead. You have 2 minutes to make your closing argument.
Yeah, well, let me make it this way. So this is based off of BigCommerce as a B2B commerce platform, right? Where we're enabling our merchants to go ahead and launch fast, measure fast, and focus on growing their business. So let me take that focus word, right? We talk about focusing on the basics, lowering your total cost of ownership and increasing your revenue. So yeah, you can get mired in the whole ROI and justification of everything, but it's ROI for me is looking backwards at something that just happened, where KPIs are looking forward at things that are in the process of happening today. So I'd err on the side of looking at KPIs more than ROI. Actually, Andy, I'm going to agree with you a little bit, right? You got to operate within that first 12-month budget that you have. Like I know, the market can shift and change any day on a business, and competition can change. So you've got to be able to be nimble inside of your environment, right? You've also got to accommodate new ways of doing things. So some of the mentions that you had there on one of your very first slides was around chatbots and other things, starting to integrate technology stacks into your e-com platform that don't necessarily take away from your physical salespeople that are going knocking door to door or making phone calls, but is taking some of that burden away from them and lowering the cost of those salespeople. I think Martha made the comment that you can have your salespeople now making more phone calls or dedicating more time with some of your key clients than ever before. So having a technology platform like BigCommerce where you can start integrating these things together is going to be so key, as well as expanding into new channels, right? We've also talked about the Amazon stuff. You guys sort of argued about it at the beginning. There are many more marketplaces and channels out there that you need to integrate into, and you need to do it quickly. Yes, I get this whole idea about building out ROI and business cases. But if you can just click and integrate, go do it and test and learn as you go through it. So there are countless benefits. Don't just let trying to measure something slow you down from launching your site, re-platforming your site today, or distract you from growing your business. Make your management, your investors and teams aware of these amazing benefits and invest in your e-commerce solution today. Don't wait for that investment to come 12 months down the line. You don't have the luxury of waiting. That's it.
Yep. No, that's a great point, Megan. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate your involvement today and great arguments. So now it's time for the decision. The music. So dramatic. I love that. Okay, guys. Well, hey, thank you, audience, for participating today. We make sure we're going to reveal the poll questions in just a few minutes. Andy, what did you? So, kind of summing it up here, we got a few minutes left. What were your thoughts? What were some of your key takeaways?
Well, I think it was a great debate, and this is why we do these debates, because people get locked into positions, and this stretches their thinking, right? But I want to actually go back to. I jotted some things down here that we learned from our LinkedIn debate about this, which was the pre-debate debate, kind of the weigh-in for the boxing match. And I thought there were really some interesting comments that people made. I want to read a couple here. So Steve Edwards from Win Supply talked about sales velocity, which is something we didn't actually get a chance to talk about much here. And I think about things like online reorders. I mean, if somebody can order online more quickly through a self-serve platform, then there's a velocity associated with that needs to be calculated versus calling somebody and just the time it takes. Marta talked a little bit about that, having a sales rep on for 5 minutes or what have you. There's a time value of money here that people need to keep in mind on both sides of the equation. Yeah,
I agree with you there, Andy. That manifests in so many interesting ways. One of the things we didn't talk about today was gross margin, right? I've got case studies in my book that talk about how companies that are using the e-commerce channel can actually achieve a higher gross margin on their orders. I have a case study from a company called Kelly Paper in the book. 3% higher gross margin on every sale that happens in e-commerce. Why? Because it's more convenient for the buyer to buy there. They can charge more, but also a call doesn't happen to the sales rep. Now, again, this is not about death of a salesman, but there's no discounts given when they don't need to be. So that's, I think, another measure here that's gravy. That's on top of everything else.
Sounds like death of a B2B salesman to me.
Well, no, it's
point,
not.
Brian. I wasn't even trying to make that point, but thank you.
Right.
So there were a couple other really good comments. One from Michael Hoffer from Zulig Pharma. He's based in Singapore, and he's actually had 4 different dimensions to ROI, some of which we talked about. But he said, hey, you got to think about productivity gains in the sales force and in customer service, revenue increases per full-time employee, a lot of cost avoidance. We didn't really go into great detail about that. I know companies that do e-commerce purely for call deflection in the call center. So there's a lot of value in that. We talked about, upside with the revenue, incremental, et cetera. But don't forget some of these other things that matter, these operational efficiencies around retaining business, enabling people to focus on higher value activities. So you're not doing order taking, hint, hint, but pushing that off to e-commerce. Well, how do you calculate the value of that if you're paying people to do higher value work?
Right. Well, this is a good framework I think we have here, and this is out of my book actually, where we talk about and Marta alluded to this: revenue lift, revenue shift, profit enhancement, and organizational efficiencies. And I like to think about it actually in these 3 buckets. So at the end of the day, Andy, I do think you have to have a plan. As much as I've been on Keep It Simple, I think Keep It Simple is important. You got to pick the right metrics in each of these areas. But this is a good framework for folks to think about. Anything you want to add to this one?
No, I think that does capture it all. I think we double clicked on each of them in quite some detail. Maybe not so much the organizational efficiency side, but do not forget that when you're doing your ROI calculations, when you're presenting to your senior executives, don't forget about that. Or some of the soft metrics around branding and influence. These are harder to measure, but they're no less important in an ROI calculation.
Okay. Well, Andy, we want to get to our wrap up here, and we have some really cool stuff coming. But before we do that, we've got to reveal our poll results. So hopefully we have those ready. Let's go ahead. Okay, round one. What does it take to measure B2B e-commerce ROI effectively? Few metrics or many? Few. I think we won this round, Mr.
Brian,
Mr. Andy Hoare.
Looks like your family and relatives voted today.
I did.
Because,
Yep.
You got them all to vote.
My offshore call center was going crazy. Okay, round two. Let's go to round two. Is generating incremental revenue versus just revenue necessary for accepting ROI calculation? Yes. Oh, interesting. Okay, so that's a vote for your
These
team.
are digital mature companies that tried the shift argument exclusively and found that people said, oh, that's great, but what have you done for me lately? And so I think people in second generation or 2.0 recognize you have to have incremental in here too.
Yeah. And number three is customer lifetime value. Ooh, worth your time. And 71% said no. Bam. Keep it simple.
Apparently ready, fire, aim is now the way to go. No,
come on now.
Joking about that. No, I think, I think what happens is when people think about CLV, they get into complicated academic stuff. And what there needs to be is a streamlined version of it. You can't just say, hey, let's just throw it up there and see what happens.
Look at share of wallet from your customer. That's a good proxy to start with. It's an easy way to measure it. Look at how much you're getting from each customer, average orders over time. I want to say thank you to our panelists, our contenders. You guys did an awesome job. Thank you for the audience. You guys contributed a lot this time around, and really a lot of comments back and forth. Really appreciate that. And we hope to see you again on another webinar. Andy, any closing words?
No, I think this is great. Great debate. And I'll look forward to the next one next month. So I'll see you then.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining.
Bye-bye.